This is Asia's Farm to Fork 5 Good Questions podcast, bringing you insights and views from across Asia's food value chain. Now, for today's interview. Everybody, I'm Duke Hipp, host of Asia's Farm to Fork 5 Good Questions podcast, and we've done it again. We've got another great guest with us. We're thankful to have her join us today. We have with us Erika Balzerelli. She's the founder of the Sustainable Smallholder. Hi, Erika.
Hi, Duke. Good morning. How are you?
Great. Well, this is a topic we talk a lot about on this podcast, and we're thankful that you've made time to join us today. So we'll jump right in if it's okay.
Let's do that.
So, of course, the first big topic is sustainability, yes, but smallholder farmer, right? We talk a lot about this is the smallholder farmer in Asia, this part of the world. We have the distinction of having the smallest size farms and the greatest number of smallholders anywhere in the world. And despite the challenges, the many challenges that they face, the reality is they produce, these farmers here in Asia produce up to 80% of the food that we consume right here. Again, reflecting the critical role that they play in food production for our region. So with the drive to realize more sustainable food systems underway here in Asia and around the world, I'd like to get your thoughts on what government should be doing, how they can help ensure this transition for the smallholders and the processes. What does your organization, the Sustainable Smallholder, do to support that? And any thoughts you have on that topic?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts on that topic. I think that I would like to start by saying that especially governments in India and in the ASEAN region are already actually doing quite a lot to not only support smallholder farming and making it more productive, but as well starting to shift it towards more sustainable production systems. And they do that by very simple yet very effective means. So, for example, India is widely recognized for working a lot with the so-called FPOs, farmer producer organizations, because as we know, and as you were also saying in your intro, one of the main challenges of smallholders is its fragmentation. So you have to overcome fragmentation. One of the ways to do it extremely effectively is by cooperatives or these farmer producer organizations. So we see in countries like India and in some countries in ASEAN as well, that government has played a very crucial and very active role in setting these up and as well in incentivizing them in order to actually play effective roles in aggregation. We also see government quite active in other, what I call the basics of agriculture. So we see governments very active in giving equal access to water, whether it's canal structures, whether it's other type of water infrastructure, such as smaller canals. Sometimes it's subsidies through different types of drip and or sprinkler irrigation systems. So at least, small farmers have access to water so they can actually farm. Another of these basics that government do is helping in protecting the soil, which is vital to sustainability. So you see more and more focus on, for example, education on what is soil health and giving away soil health cards so that actually the farmers can start to understand when my soil has got a certain color, that means that it's not so good. Hence, I need to do X, Y, and Z. Now, all of that is great, but what is really gonna turn the dial, in my opinion, is that government needs to further show that there is a business case, a profitable business case in investing in sustainable smallholder agriculture. So meaning really incentivizing more and more for the private sector to come in and actually invest. That's gonna probably close a very big part of the gap that we see. And that is actually as well where the smallholder, the sustainable smallholder farmer, my company, plays a huge role. So what we do is we design transition pathways for smallholder farmers, and we also help implement. But when we talk about the design of these transition pathways, we do not only talk about agronomy protocols. We really talk about understanding and building a value proposition and or business model that is lucrative for the one who invests, but at the same time lucrative as well for the farmer, because that's the only way you can actually make it work and make it scale. So I think that that's really going to turn the dial, that showing that there is a business case to invest, and hence that is why we have built our work around doing that effectively.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. You touched on a few things there. So, and as far as, and this is my second question, but sort of to tee it up, you talked about it's important to make the case for governments and for the farmer that to be profitable at the same time, and it can be done, certainly. And to that point, I think with the second question, I'd like to maybe weight it that a little bit more. The smallholder and what they're facing. How do you strike the right balance there with encouraging the smallholders to, yes, please pursue more sustainable practices and continue to move in that direction? And we're all nudging things in that direction, but at the same time, the profitability question. And we know that too many of these smallholder farmers are living, in the margins with frankly, are in poverty, lack of access to markets and technology and finance and all these issues. What is the right balance there? And
yeah,
how do we do that?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question, because that's really getting at the sweet spot, if you will, of I think what is the real challenge when we talk about regenerative systems or sustainable systems with smallholder farming. So one thing I would like to say up front is that when we talk about smallholder farming, there are different dimensions at play that cannot be siloed. So there's an economic dimension at play, which you could argue is the most important, because if the farmer doesn't make profit from season number one, in other words, if the farmer by the end of the season of growing whatever crop doesn't have money to put in his pocket to eat, to send his children to school and to buy clothing, it's not gonna work. So that economic dimension is extremely important. Then there is a social dimension. Small farmers live and work in very complex social rural systems with very complex dynamics. One of its dynamics is that the fact that you've got a village lead there. Challenging conventional and or wisdom of the community is difficult. So that's why we see with smaller farmers that many times they are very risk averse, and that aversion is taken away by things such as we say in the sector, seeing is believing. That's why we want to work with lead farmers and so forth. So that social aspect cannot be underlooked. And then obviously there's the environmental aspect, which is it's not so easy to say, oh, we're going to increase soil fertility. Because many times, even within one plot of, say, 1 hectare, which is already big for a smallholder, there might be up to 20 different soil structures. So to your point, how do you balance that? Well, I'm not saying we have the solution, but over the last 3 years, having worked a lot on the ground with smallholders and with the private sector in doing this, we have developed a framework. And we call this framework the SEED framework. Basically, what the SEED framework says is, first, transitions are a journey. If you want to move smallholders to sustainable farming, it takes at least up to 3 calendar years. And even there, you're not done yet. Key guiding principle number 2. Profit needs to be there for the smallholder farmer from season number 1. Point. Otherwise, it's not gonna work. 3, community needs to be fully engaged. Otherwise, you cannot scale. Those are the 3 very simple key guiding principles. Now let's come back to the SEED framework. Over that journey of 3 years, we've got 3 horizons. The first horizon is really start and enhance. What we mean by that is optimize efficiency. So don't introduce anything new, just optimize efficiency of what the smaller farming is doing today. So, quick example to keep things very simple. Are you using drip irrigation? Probably if you do cash crops. Are you using it correctly? Probably not. How can we use it correctly? How can we make sure that you actually really increase your yield and conserve water? Are you dripping the water at the right point in time within the day? Or are you doing it at 12 o'clock when evaporation takes 50% of your water? Are you doing it at 6 a.m. in the morning and so forth? So optimizing efficiency is super important. We also see a lot of overutilization of nitrogen fertilizer. I just read a report, 30% overutilization in ASEAN. So go to the smallholder, basically calculate quickly, 20% less, that's 20% more in his pocket by the end of the season. So step number one, the start and enhance phase, optimize efficiency of what you're already doing. Phase number two, after a couple of seasons, it's all about introducing new yet simple regenerative practices. Cover crops, one of the most easy things to do. Circular waste management. It sounds very, very complex. It's not. Actually, you can see it right here. You know what that is? That's rice stubble. Just put it on the ground to conserve water, to conserve soil fertility. You're done. That's circular waste management. It even composts. And we have shown in Myanmar and in Cambodia that it decreases 10% of synthetic fertilizer need for the next season. So that's, again, another cost saving for the farmer in the pocket. Easy intercropping. Also, on the buns of the rice farm, for example, put a banana tree there. It even is better for water conservation. Those are very simple things to introduce once you've gained the farmer's trust. The third pillar, which is the most complex pillar, we call that the elevate and deliver pillar of our seed framework. Here we talk about introducing more complex practices, such as a new type of seed, a new type of climate-resistant seed. It sounds very easy, but those are very big decisions, very complex decisions. Introduction of livestock management and regenerative practices, such as docks in rice. Sounds very nice, very interesting, extremely complex to do. A minimum till, everybody talks about minimum till. Sounds very easy, very difficult to do, especially for a small farmer who doesn't have the machinery to do that properly. So those are things that are reserved for the end game, the end phase, once you have upgraded the farmer and its community to a certain level of understanding, and most important, to a certain level of trust. Trust that what you're co-creating with them is actually valuable, and they have started to see the results in their pockets and in their soils over the last 2 to 3 seasons. So this seed framework that we have co-created at the Sustainable Smallholder, we believe that this is actually one of the effective ways to transition smallholders to more sustainable production systems, and to make the business case as well for private sector that this is actually a profitable business opportunity as well for them to invest in.
Well, thank you for that. Very, certainly a lot of work has gone into this, very practical, pragmatic. As you said, it's a journey, that transition, and you've come up with quite an approach there. So thank you for sharing that. The next question I had for you is about another reality we face, that farmers are facing here in Asia, certainly around the world, and that's the reality of gender discrimination. We know from studies and data that it is real. The disparity really with access to resources that women-run farms are facing. I think up to 30% less productive because of their male counterparts and the access that they do enjoy. And so there's a lot of data that goes into this. We know that providing female farmers with the same access to resources would increase agricultural output, reduce poverty, lift between 100 to 150 million people out of poverty. So compelling evidence that more should and could be done. So in that spirit, any initiatives that come to mind that you have in mind that are helping women you've seen firsthand that are helping women farmers get ahead?
Yeah. Yes, and it's very close to my heart because obviously I'm a woman and I go to these communities and I see my fellow friends, fellow women friends, girls, women, and they live such a different life. And I often ask myself, what has driven that? I was in Egypt. I know this is outside of the Asia scope for this podcast, but I still wanna share this because it was shocking to me. Women farmers in Egypt on labor to plant rice fields, because in Egypt they also plant rice. They make 50% less per day than a man for the exact same amount of hours and of work. So that is what we are facing. So yes, it's very close to my heart, and we all should strive to make the situation more equal and more fair. What I have seen work, and those are also some of the initiatives that we try to include as much as possible in our work. When I talked about that seed framework, that social aspect, one of the big dimensions is not only the community engagement, but obviously when we talk about community, let's say 30 to 50 is women, or sometimes even more, they are an intrinsic part of that. So we need to have to make that equal. Um, so to your question, a couple of things that I've seen work is, first of all, when we do trainings or any type of events where we also invite women, we need to be extremely careful of any cultural and or religious dimensions to that. That includes thinking, which for us Westerners is sometimes not something that pops in our minds, but it's very important to think is this the appropriate timing to do a meeting? Is this the appropriate venue to do a meeting? Can a woman come here by herself or accompanied by her brother? Is it appropriate venue? Is it actually appropriate to have women and men in the same room? Is it appropriate to have or to not have seating arranged for women versus men? So those are very important things to think through, very simple yet extremely important and effective if they're well thought through. Other things that we do is we have seen, for example, in countries like Bangladesh, that women lead farmers are much more effective in their jobs than on average. Obviously, outliers are always there, but much more effective in their jobs in terms of redistributing knowledge, inspiring the community, take up new practices, and than their male counterparts. And so we have started actually to work a lot with the selection of dedicated women lead farmers. So that is again very simple yet extremely effective. Some of the other things I was noting them down. Some of the other things that we have done is when we talk about microfinancing and more entrepreneurship opportunities within the wider agriculture sector, is actually selecting and investing in young, doesn't actually even have to be young, but women in the community, give them a micro loan and have them start up their own business. Sometimes it's as easy as a little shop. It doesn't have to be one-to-one connected to agriculture because anyhow you're within the rural community. So it implicitly will actually benefit the entire community, farmer and non-farmer. So we have seen these women start up little shops, starting a new business activity on, for example, knitting bags and or school uniforms for the children in the community. So that income diversification aspect, sometimes we bring that in as well. And we have seen that that immediately does not only increase the economic um, situation, livelihood of the community, but obviously as well of the family, and it immediately brings a certain type of gender balance and more equality to the community, which then inspires, which is very important, inspires the rest of the community and the rest of the surrounding communities and villages.
Excellent. Thank you for those insights. You're absolutely right. There's more we can be doing, and that's very interesting. It's a layered. There's some different aspects and different approaches that are encouraging, showing results, as you said, that are helpful. So thank you for that. Something else I wanted to touch on with the fourth question is there are two topics that come up on this podcast a lot and intersect a lot, and that is climate change and its obviously effect on food production, and then the role of innovation, where innovation can play a role, particularly with the increase of floods, droughts, and disease, and all that goes with that. So, yeah, I wanted to come to you then and think about that role of innovation, but not necessarily innovation, just generally with climate change. Are there tools or methods you've seen, again, where you said that have been effective in helping farmers, particularly the smallholders, of course, in mitigating and adapting some of these climate-related challenges?
Yeah, I love that question because one of the points that I always like to make is that especially within smallholder farmer agriculture, when we talk innovation, we usually as human beings like to think about the next big transformation, life-changing new idea. But we don't need that. We don't need that at all in agriculture. And I will get challenged on that. That can be another podcast. Would love to do that. But within smaller agriculture, the innovation that we have today, the technologies that we have today, the knowledge that we have on practices today, the knowledge that we have on behavioral science today is enough to repackage that in a simple way with the seed framework, for example, and deliver that to smallholders. So point being, we don't need anything new. And I'm going to show you what we can use and what we have done extremely effectively. So first thing, as I also talked about this during the Crop Life Symposium, hybrid seeds. Hybrid seeds with traits. They already exist. Governments are already doing that, coming back to your first question. Even inbreds, doesn't have to be hybrids, have climate smart traits. For the people amongst us who don't know what that is, that means the seed has got something inbuilt, not GMO, nothing crazy, just all natural, has something inbuilt whereby it can resist droughts. Another seed has something in it which can resist a certain amount of pests. For example, those seeds exist. And that is a very big part of the strategy of climate resilience, especially for smallholder farmers. So we need to give them and to get them a smart access to these seeds. That usually is a business model question. That's not an Einstein question. It's about overcoming fragmentation and the right point in pricing. The second technology that we can use that is already available is things such as integrated pest management and or natural pest management. Those are things that our ancestors used to do, but we forgot. So things such as planting lemongrass, we all know what that is, across the fields, that can suppress pests by sometimes up to 60%. When you go into the fields and you ask farmers, especially in ASEAN, what is your biggest problem with pests? They say rats. Lemongrass and neem trees, rats will not come because they detest the smell. So those are very simple, effective, cheap things that are very good for nature and very good for the smallholder farmer. So these type of pragmatic things. The other thing is precision agriculture. Precision agriculture when it comes to water. We talked about drip irrigation. Drip irrigation is underutilized and underexploited. If done well, it's a fantastic way to improve productivity and sustainability. Soil mapping with drones is is penetrating a lot in sub-Saharan Africa. but now we see it as well in countries like Cambodia, northern Vietnam, on coffee, on export tree and fruit trees, for example. So you have a drone, they map the soil, they map the tree with a very easy mobile application. You know exactly what product to use where, which tree has to be actually cut and grow anew. How does the canopy need to be cut? Very, very effective, very cheap, especially now that it's gaining skill. And last but not least, sustainable practices. We talked about cover crops, but sustainable practices such as beekeeping or composting. Those are not new technologies. Those are things that our ancestors used to do. If we bring them back, they are extremely effective. They are immediately will offer a net profit for the farmer and an immediate environmental benefit. So that's why coming back to that seed framework, working these things in at the right time can be extremely beneficial. Yeah, for all of us involved.
Yeah, thank you for that. You're right. We certainly could have a whole separate podcast on nothing but innovation, from some of the more primitive pieces to more elaborate technologies and everything in between. A lot of interesting thoughts. Thank you for that. So the last question is here. This might be the toughest question. It might be the simplest. It kind of depends on
Okay, hit
what
me.
But yeah, so it's not it's not a complicated question. It gets down to food. We've talked with our guests about their favorite foods, and everybody has a different perspective and opinion on that, certainly, but we all love it, and there's a lot of options certainly to choose from. So that's what I want to ask you. If you had to pick one, is there one you would go with? Favorite Asian food?
Man, that's very difficult because what I love about Asia is the street food. It's just, walking on the street and just eating. But if I really, really have to pick one, then probably I would go with a vegetarian pad thai,
Hmm.
like a good old veg pad thai. I love it with a little bit of peanuts on top and tauge. That's probably one of my big favorites.
That is the first we've had that, so that's awesome. We'll include that in our list, and at some point we'll do a
All right.
compilation of all these together. So terrific. Thanks again for making time to do this. Appreciate you being with us and sharing more about the Sustainable Smallholder and the work you're doing, and hope to talk again soon.
Thank you very much, Duke. It was really a pleasure to be invited, and it's always a pleasure to have a broader platform to really talk about how we can help smallholder farmers to becoming more profitable and more sustainable. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and if you did, please rate, review, and subscribe. We look forward to bringing you another 5 Good Questions interview.